Good morning, everybody. I think we can get started. We have 1 more minute to go, but I know the room's full, so we'll get started in every respective time. Good morning. Thank you for coming. My name is Abi. I'm a part of the Databricks security organization, and along with me is David, who is also a part of the security field team and specializes in certain aspects of the platform as a whole. So together, we created the governance framework that we're going to talk about today. Thank you all for coming again. I know this is probably one of the first sessions you guys are attending at Summit. We really appreciate you being here, and we couldn't be doing what we do without you guys. So, also apologies for my voice. I landed in San Francisco yesterday, and I got a cold, believe it or not. And my shirt is too fancy to have a mic that, sits in one place, so I have to hold this one. My colleague is better dressed today, so he's going to be able to do that without the wireless mic. All right, so let's get started. Very simple forward-looking statement. Please don't take what we say here for anything that is pertaining to Databricks as a whole. We are simply here to make a framework-related conversation happen. We're not here to make any commitments around the future. And yes, mandatory surveys for all attendees to give us super high scores. Thank you. All right, so we've kind of started on who we are, what we do, and I want to go ahead and get started on. I'm going to wait for 1 more second to see if we can close the door, but if not, all right, let's go. This is the agenda for today. We're going to try and keep it pretty simple, pretty light, and you will see why we think this doesn't have to be a very heavy deck. There's not going to be a lot of dense slides, hopefully, that we will spend a lot of time on. We're going to introduce what we call the governance framework. We're going to talk about why we built it, what challenges we saw in the market that we thought we could address, and how we built it. And we're going to explain how you could leverage it and what's coming after that. So it's a pretty straightforward agenda. You will be able to see a little bit of detail into the thinking behind it as we go along these slides, but there's a couple of surprises we've hidden for you along the way. All right. So as you were sitting down, if you were thinking, wait, isn't governance a legal problem? Isn't governance more so a supply chain problem, or maybe even a procurement or an operations problem? Why are 2 nerdy-looking security guys here talking to me about governance? What's security got to do with governance? And truth be told, about 18 months ago, when the entire AI wave was being established across the industry, and we had a lot of customers coming to us and asking true security questions, right? Hey, what is data poisoning? How do you prevent model theft? How do you handle my weights data? And how do I protect that information as I build my models and tune my models within my enterprise? And we had genuine, fun conversations about those things, and we realized there was a gap in the market, gap in understanding around the market, and we actually led the initiative to build a whole framework around it. We called it the Databricks AI Security Framework. We launched it about 12 months ago. We have done about 100 workshops around that, and this has been really successful. But along the way, about 6 to 8 months ago, we started getting pulled into more conversations not so closely related to security. We started getting pulled into conversations about bias, ethics, transparency, interpretability, privacy, the EU AI Act, data provenance, and even sustainability, right? And it kind of led to us thinking to ourselves, why are we security guys being pulled into these conversations? And we were led to a couple of conclusions. One, there is no one else, apparently, to talk about this in the market today. And second, we were being pulled by our counterparts in these enterprises. When I say counterparts, I mean security teams and risk teams within enterprises, because somehow, somewhere, someone decided that all of these conversations around responsible AI, around risk and around bias, these are your problems. Guys, go deal with it. And it became part of the problem for them, and therefore they pulled us into it and say, hey guys, we're being asked to handle this. How can we get help around this? And that's when we also realized, I distinctly remember a conversation around hallucination and having a 30-minute argument about whether hallucination is a security problem. Is it a engineering problem because the models weren't built so well? Or is it a data quality and data quantity problem because there wasn't enough high-quality training data available to build these models? And it was awe-inspiring because all of these could apply, and not a lot of answers were available at that time. Which then led to what we think are the 4 challenges that we see organizations facing. One, there is a whole bunch of new functions and new work that comes with AI as a whole, and when organizations deploy AI programs within the enterprise. And there is not a lot of clear understanding of what teams are required to own what parts of those programs. Is risk management traditionally held by IT and somewhere in legal? Probably. Is AI risk management an IT function or a legal function? Maybe, if you have the right people in those teams, right? Or maybe it's just an engineering problem. And this is, I promise, this is across every enterprise in some way or the other visible and is a continuing problem even today. The next problem is related to nomenclature as we saw it. We had engineering teams talk about model risk and data theft and so on, but we didn't see security teams fully understand what they meant. We had privacy teams and legal teams talk about data protection, but we didn't see data teams understand what they really mean when they say, hey, when you have private data as part of your training models or training data sets for your models, you're going to have to bring in a certain set of controls to deal with those. Again, not a lot of understanding between these teams, and even the phraseology used in these conversations was not fully and widely understood because the definitions for each one of those words was different for different teams. Then we had this other problem where there are no standards today, not in the way that you would expect. How quickly AI has moved. There hasn't really been a lot of work by standards agencies, I think, in my personal view, to sustain the development and the growth of this entirely new paradigm of these technologies. And without standards comes this notion of people don't necessarily understand what each of these terms means, how to measure a certain function and how to measure success of a certain aspect of AI. And then that leads to a clear problem, and this is the most important problem as it pertains to AI today. And I know you've heard this line, AI is just another hype thing, just like crypto. There's so much money going in, but there's not a lot of value coming out. It's probably going to go away soon. And, I promise you, it's not going away. And I know you all believe that, and that's why you're here. But that's part of the reason we keep hearing that is because there is a clear dearth of measurable, actionable metrics to define what success means for some of these components of an AI program, and what team owns what, and how do you build together a structured program to keep your journey alive, to keep and measuring yourself and to keep going up and bringing all of your teams around to success. So we then, hey, stroke of genius, right? We think this is not a security problem, this is not one problem, this is a governance problem. Which then leads you to believe and leads you to ask me, hey, that's not that great of a conclusion. I mean, it is obviously a governance problem, and we've kind of already solved governance problems before. 20 years ago when the cloud exploded, we had similar problems and we figured it out. Why is this such a big deal now? And why is AI so difficult or different to handle? Which is a really good question. I think we have a few reasons for it. One of them is that not all AI programs are the same. 20 years ago when we started deploying to the cloud, you had a lot of similarities between what every organization did to migrate their on-premise data sets to the cloud, to migrate their processes to the cloud, and governance around what a cloud program would look like had somewhat of a unified approach across enterprises, across the market. With AI, it's very different. If you look at even within a single organization, within a single enterprise, if you look at 4 different very common use cases that we see with our customers, every one of these examples has various different considerations that need to come into play that some of the others do not have at all, right? So when you're talking about personal data and private data, and when you're building, for example, a fraud detection model for the bank that you work for or for the risk agency that you work for, it is very sensitive data that needs to be dealt with in a very sensitive manner. But when you're doing a very simple RAG for an LLM-tuned chatbot within your enterprise, that's not so sensitive, but it has its own considerations because accuracy becomes super important, and how you handle bias and how you handle transparency is also super important. The next problem is SDLC. Like the whole model of how cloud, remember the SDLC model from 15 years ago when all you had was 4 boxes where you had to do is design, test, deploy, and manage, right? The SDLC processes with AI today, especially in large enterprises where there's a lot of tuning happening, a lot of training happening, it's impossible to think about the scale of it as it compares to the standard SDLC model. So that's made it really difficult as well. And then finally, when we were doing cloud migrations, it wasn't that hard. We didn't have different societies answering the same questions in very different ways. But we do with AI. And this adds an unseen before complexity to this whole problem. Now that we've defined, I think, what we saw as the problem, the next question becomes, okay, why us? Why does Databricks think it can solve for this? And I promise you will see the slide many times. You've probably already seen it many times, and you'll see it a few more times over the next couple of days. But for us, being the OG ML platform, being the OG ML company, we've had these conversations with customers about model training, for example, for over 5 years. And we've talked to customers across every geographic location you can think of, across every market you can think of, every size you can think of. And that has given us an advantage, a perspective that is unique, that no other competitor, I think, truly has. And we wanted to turn that around and do something back for the community. The other part of it as well is, yes, we are security folks and we talk to security guys, but as a company, as a platform, between our solution architecture teams, between security teams, between sales teams and account teams, we've hit every persona that you can think of in every one of these enterprises and organizations, which means we've gathered and collected and we've been able to understand where each of these personas are coming from, their own internal problems as they deploy AI, and their own internal questions and concerns. So that then led to our conclusion that, look, we understand the problem. We think we're a unique place to solve for it. So, and we think there's not really any one comprehensive framework. I say comprehensive, and that will become evident soon. There is not one comprehensive standard. There's not one comprehensive framework that helps all of these personas across all these enterprises across the globe. So we built it. And we had 2 main goals here when we built this. We wanted it to be structured, and we wanted it to be actionable. That's one of the biggest. Remember the whole responsible AI thing? I think now everybody stopped talking about it. It was like maybe 6 months ago, 12 months ago. Everybody had responsible AI principles. Everybody published them. Everybody was proud about them. But what bothered me was nobody talked about how exactly they intended to achieve bias mitigation, how exactly they intended to bring transparency into the models they leveraged or into the processes they built around these AI models. And they still haven't. And we wanted to solve for that. So we wanted it to be actionable. We didn't want it to just be hot air on paper. We wanted it to be structured because there's going to be multiple teams across the board that don't fully understand how to deploy AI, and we wanted to bring education into this framework, and that was the huge value for us in bringing this and building this. The one thing we did not want it to be, we did not want the framework to be, is a clear, prescriptive, hold your hands guidance document where this is how we say this is exactly how you do things. That's not at all the intent. What we tried to do was categorize what we thought were serious considerations that every organization had to think about, probably had to answer. Some of them may not be applicable to all of them. But once they do that, they'll figure out what best way to structure their programs. And these were the considerations that we wanted to bring into the framework. So we structured it to have it be spread across 5 pillars, with each pillar coming with its own set of considerations. And I know I'm running out of time, I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, but the one thing I wanna highlight was the AI organizations is the largest pillar that we built out, primarily because we think this is where the biggest challenge is being handed down to existing enterprise risk teams, enterprise governance teams, who are used to doing the IT governance and IT risk management, but are being now forced to learn and educate themselves and then switch over to doing AI governance. we built this out primarily for those guys, and we structured across in a certain way, just so it would be super handy and very useful as they go about doing it. So I'm going to give the mic over to David, who's going to walk you guys through the framework.
Okay, so the first pillar is the AI organization pillar. It focuses on how enterprises can establish foundation for managing AI in quantifiable and effective manner by defining structural, strategic, and operational elements that govern AI. To put it another way, we wanted to call this section AI governance, but since this is a governance framework, we couldn't use the title twice, but it's designed essentially to try to cover the elements of the overview, management, et cetera, that you would expect from an AI program. And because we're trying to make this program generic across the different industries, AI types, et cetera, it's not meant to be a prescriptive one-size-fits-all solution. It's more meant to be a series of considerations that you can use in your AI program based off of the program itself. So to put it another way, we've imagined the world's largest AI organization and program, and from there you can tweak and tune it to what makes sense to your organization. So just giving you an example of the AI organization elements themselves, we start with the business alignment. One area that we see that we think a lot of organizations miss is that they build an AI solution looking for a problem. And where we see a lot of success is with organizations that tend to understand their business objectives and align their AI programs with their business objectives first, because then you're able to quantify the value of the program to the value to the organization itself. Second is the governance model. There are many types of governance models that you can actually implement as part of an AI program. And so picking the model that makes sense for your organization can be very important, because in some situations, having a lot of control over all the programs is important, and in other, it can actually hinder what you're actually trying to achieve. Having guiding values and strategies set at a high level helps individual entities, lines of businesses, initiatives be able to align their goals, their objectives, and the parameters in which they function within to the organization's higher level values. Having roles and responsibilities, I think everybody would agree, are quite important, but being able to understand what roles and responsibilities you have today versus what you'll need down in the future is definitely valuable as you look at AI, not in terms of a current capability, but an evolving function that you will mature over time. Policy, standards, and procedures is a touchy subject in terms of most organizations have existing policies and procedures where AI tends to change the nature of policies and procedures or the way that you react to systems. So the autonomous, non-deterministic nature of AI, depending on how it's deployed within your organization, may require an update to the way that you troubleshoot, the way that you have incident responses, et cetera. Risk management, at this layer, we're more focusing on enterprise risk and key performance indicators for the program, and then reporting structures to be able to quantify the effect of your AI program as you speak to a higher level executive or even the board, having an understanding of the risk to the program from both a success point of view, but also an organizational point of view, the key performance indicators that indicate whether or not your AI program is achieving the goals that is meant to within the business organization or the business function itself, and how you report that can actually determine the understanding of those above you and the support for the program that you receive. So let's go through the first consideration, the governance. So governance model defines how AI programs are governed across the organization. Pretty straightforward. So when you're defining your governance model, you want to define the purpose and scope. So we mentioned earlier how there are different types of AI programs, and those AI programs have different considerations from them. Some have heavy security considerations, some don't. And so in order to define a governance program, you need to understand the complete picture of what your organization is trying to achieve. I look at it as though you often have an enterprise strategy that is creating large-scale programs that will help enable your business in a core function to your offering. But then you also have individual lines of businesses that are either creating makeshift solutions to help implement their day-to-day lives, or they're providing small services that from third parties, and all of these together create different challenges for the organization. So how do you create a governance model that allows that for where you want it and stops it from where you don't? Secondly, analyze the structural integration points. So your governance model, the one last thing that we recommend is creating committee number 14 for AI specifically. I remember, I think it was a talk with Jamie Dimon where he talked about how one executive was complaining about how he's on 12 committees, and his response was to try to find out who owns those committees and fire every one of them. So how do you integrate AI considerations into your existing structure so that you're not tacking on and adding more burden to an existing structure? Access governance, assess the current governance maturity. So AI causes certain processes, procedures, the way people function to function very differently than they do today, especially if you're augmenting or complementing existing services. So what is your organization's current capability to absorb and execute on the goals of where it is you want to go? And then finally, select a governance model and structure. So I don't think anybody finds any of this too crazy or revealing. And so this is the level of information that we have at the framework level. And so Abby mentioned how we wanted to make the framework actually actionable. And so it's a difficult balance to find usability within a framework level to make it apply to most organizations, but to provide specific instructions or details on how you can actually execute those. So we cheated a bit. What we did is most of the sections for the framework themselves include a getting started section. The getting started section is meant to be tactical elements that organizations can pick and choose based off of either what they have versus what they don't have or where they want to go in order to complement or fill in their current capabilities and essentially say, here's how I'm going to do what the framework recommends on a higher level. So to give you an idea, for the getting started section for governance model, you want to clarify the governance objectives, pretty straightforward, assess organizational structures, we touched on that, but then you want to choose the governance structure. So for example, a centralized structure within an organization is very effective for regulated industries. You want to be able to pick how much control that you want within the organization for all of your systems, and if the risk of not having that control across the board doesn't make sense, a centralized structure is much more effective in that regard. A distributed structure works better for organizations with many independent business units or businesses themselves, where you're okay with them acting independently to each other because they all take on their individual risks. The federated structure is usually for regulated entities that have the need for separating the actual individuals. So the governance model, or the higher level governance model, more acts as an understanding to make sure that they're all functioning within high level parameters. And then the hybrid structure, that functions where you may want certain quality controls, or perhaps you'll need a center of excellence to be able to help enable all of the different initiatives or lines of business that maybe it's too difficult to get that started or individually. So a hybrid structure allows you to take the best of the centralized and distributed nature as you mature your program. And then outlining key roles and authorities as part of the governance model is obviously an important step. So the framework itself is designed to be agnostic, not specific to any technology, but because I wanted Databricks to pay for my flight out here, I included some how Databricks can help for existing customers or new customers coming on. So if you think about governance models, when you think about the governance structure, centralized versus distributed versus federated, they all have very different ways in which you want to deploy your AI lifecycle capabilities. And so the two main components that Databricks can help with is Unity Catalog gives you the ability to have centralized management from a roles and responsibilities, access control, et cetera, point of view, to be able to have that capability to say who can do what where. But in the distributed model, when you look at workspaces, for example, you're able to give the individual teams the access that they require so that they can function within their realm and not affect other teams, as examples. So we're at a problem now. We're about 25 minutes into a 40-minute conversation, and we've only gone through the first part. And I don't think that a presentation is actually the best medium for a framework. And so for everybody attending today, we want to make sure, oh good, it's on a screen, I can't see. We want to make sure that everybody can walk away with a framework that actually gives them the full level of details. If you've noticed, everything I've gone through is very high level because it's a summary of the full white paper that we've created that everybody will make sure that everybody that attends today is able to get a copy of. And it's essentially the 5 pillars, the sub-considerations within those pillars in greater detail. And so you have the business alignment, for example, goes into a higher level of detail than we talked about, or governance model goes into additional considerations, et cetera. So the white paper is going to be released under the Creative Commons license in the next couple of weeks. And we'll have a sign-up page for anybody listening to this after today that wants to sign up. And we'll make sure that everybody attending today gets a copy of it. So let me go back into presentation mode. So based off that, I want to go through the actual presentation a bit faster, or the actual framework a bit faster, just because everybody's going to have not only access to this deck, but also the white paper that provides the level of detail that I'm hoping that you're looking for from a governance framework itself. So with legal and regulatory considerations, we structured this one a little bit different to more focus on the life cycle of being able to adopt the legal capabilities to protect the organization. So assessing, prioritizing, planning, deploying, monitoring, and preparing your legal capability for the different types of AI programs. So let's go through assess very quickly. The ability to understand your regulatory alignment, cross-judicial strategy, your contractual clarity, your accountability and liability, stakeholder protections. If you're building this capability out, assembling a cross-functional team so that you understand, you don't need your legal team to be AI experts or to understand what kind of capabilities that it will implement. Create a comprehensive compliance review, developing a regulatory compliance matrix. These are examples of legal assets that the team can build in order to understand if we are building out a program of this scale, this size, and these capabilities, what considerations do we need to understand from regulatory, judicial, et cetera point of view. Ethics, transparency, interpretability. We broke this down into 3 sections, ethics, transparency, interpretability, and then within the ethics section, how do you ensure that you have accountability, fairness and non-discrimination, human-centric and well-being, inclusivity, cultural norms and sensitivity. So with this section, we actually focused more on how do you set up the responsibilities and accountability to ensure that these capabilities are implemented within your AI programs where you need within the organization. It's a distributed responsibility with different elements of the organization having different responsibilities to deliver on it, and this provides a structure so that you can identify who needs to be responsible for what, so that you are deploying an AI program that is ethical and transparent. Data, AI ops, and infrastructure is the bulk of an AI program. Obviously, it is where most of the focus, technology, operations expectations go, and data is heavily influenced by the AI program itself, but is often a major challenge into it. So within data and AI operations and infrastructure, with data, we essentially recommend understanding what kind of program, what the life cycle of the program, the requirements of data across that life cycle. So certain organizations need very large generic data sets, others need actually highly accurate, maybe privileged data. And those have different security, legal expectations and responsibilities that accompany with it, and may have different security expectations as well. Same thing with data AI ops and infrastructure, understanding the life cycle and the demands that will be expected from the technology, infrastructure, et cetera, along those paths, and how you give your operations teams the insight to be able to execute on the program to meet whatever KPIs, KRIs that are expected. It starts with understanding the AI systems themselves. And so just going through the AI lifecycle very quickly, because we're a little bit behind time because I like to talk a lot. So the raw data and collection and storage we talked about. Data processing expectations, especially if you're building your own models, can be quite challenging. And if you're looking at the program today and looking at your program tomorrow, what kind of infrastructure and processing requirements, the ETL pipeline automation, et cetera, et cetera. This essentially goes into detail to say, break down the program into the individual steps that you will be executing on, understand the requirements those from a data, people, process, technology point of view, and then make sure that you're structuring yourself today and for the future state so that you are able to deliver on that model's capabilities. AI security follows the same AI lifecycle, but this system, with this chapter, we took a higher level approach to it. Because it is meant to be a governance model, we more focus on, from a higher level governance expectation, what are the individual considerations at each stage, just because you usually have different teams, different systems, different services, and different expectations. But anybody looking for a deeper dive can look into the Databricks AI Security Framework. It's a framework that was published last year by the very brilliant Arun Pamela-Pati, who's speaking at this conference as well, and that will go into a much higher level of detail than the governance framework would be allowed to. So let's walk through how you can use the DAGF program to build out your own AI program. So let's say that you have a CEO presenting your quarterly numbers at the board, and the board says, that's great. AI has the potential to be a future make or break technology. What is your AI strategy, and what are you doing? The CEO doesn't have a great answer, so he goes back to his leadership and says, we need to create a strategy and roadmap for the next quarter to present to the board. So the committee essentially starts out saying, we need to really understand how we tackle this. And so they use the DAGF as a centralized source so that everybody can function by using the same source of materials and start speaking the same language. As Abby mentioned earlier, one of the biggest challenges is when people are using different sources with different nomenclature, with different expectations, you get inconsistency and incongruencies. So in this example, the committee would be able to take the DAGF and look at AI organization sections 1 to 5 to really understand how do we tackle this problem. We want to align our AI program with business values. We want to understand what kind of governance model would work for this organization, et cetera. Then they would define the scope. So let's look at this from a top-down and bottom-up point of view. What's our enterprise strategy? What are the individual lines of businesses performing? Where do they complement? Where do they contradict each other, et cetera? And then looking at the AI organization sections 1.6 through 1.10, they define what kind of roles and responsibilities they would need, be able to scope out the SMEs, the functional aspects that should be included in this based off of the individual initiatives themselves. So the idea that when we were building out the governance framework is that we would essentially have a single source that would be able to span across multiple teams, multiple capabilities, interest areas, and they can all use the same source materials to be able to have that collaborative conversation. The lines of businesses can align their goals with the committee's objectives and expectations, because when you look through section 1 of the document, we have a certain recommendation for how to approach these types of challenges. And then the stakeholders can have a clear understanding of not only the program's objectives, but their expectations, because when you look at the getting started section and the details, it allows them to scope what it is expected from them in order to achieve their portion of the program's responsibility. So let's look at an example. You go through, you define your high-level and low-level AI objectives. You have an understanding of what you do within the organization, and then you go to your general counsel. The general counsel can review the DAGF, specifically Section 2, legal and regulatory, risk management, ethics, and transparency, to understand not only what their responsibilities are in a program like this, but the complementary responsibilities that other teams may deliver on. And that allows them to define, okay, if we're going to deliver this type of program, we'll need certain capabilities so that as new lines of businesses want to add on AI services or existing services that are including AI capabilities, we want a regulatory compliance matrix to understand whether or not those services are conflicting. We want a legal risk scoring so we can identify the risk of these new services. We want pre-approved legal clauses, et cetera, et cetera. Same with the chief technology officer. Section 4 is definitely designed for CIOs, CTOs, but understanding sections 1.5 to 9 allows them to understand from an organizational point of view the people, process technology, the KPIs that would be expected from the overall program so that they can align their KPIs, their metrics to the larger program's expectations. And then they can review sections 2, 3, and 5 so that they know what their legal security functions are expecting from him as well. And then build out his deliverable expectations on that. So Abby mentioned earlier, one of the biggest challenges is there's a lot of individual reports, white papers, risk papers, et cetera, that individual teams can review. And what we did was we tried to build a framework that covers most of the executive or leadership's expectations, needs, et cetera, so that they can all work from the same source of materials and speak the same language. So the idea is that by having this broad scope program and the broad scope framework that covers most of the organization's expectations and needs to build out their program, they can move from the questions that we saw earlier of how do I build out this program to here's what I need to do to execute on this. And then with the example, it essentially, I'm going to skip through this a bit because we're running out of time, but the committee would be able to consolidate the initiatives together, include elements that are often missed early in the program planning, such as we know we need a legal risk review for certain types of elements. We know that we're not going to be able to accept certain types of initiatives. Let's remove those right away, et cetera. And that allows them to create a board report that would be focused on not the business value that these initiatives would be able to deliver and the risks expected from them, or the risks that are accompanied from them, and our success metrics so that we can say whether or not we're on track or on expectations, or at what point do we pull the plug on these initiatives because they're not meeting expectations and they're creating too much of a risk for the organization. So to summarize, we hope that people who do use the Databricks AI Governance Framework, it helps them to be able to align and create ownership for the entire program's lifecycle. We hope that it allows them to create business value consistency so that they can quantify the value of these initiatives. And then we hope that they were able to build out a scalable and flexible program, because being able to think ahead and understand what it is you need today, but also where you want to go tomorrow, allows you to plan and be able to understand whether or not you're on track to get there.
Thank you. Thank you, David. And I know we are out of time. I only have a couple more slides to talk about what's coming up next. The first thing I wanted to highlight was that one of the bigger questions we had from our customers when we talked about the idea of coming up with a framework was, hey, how do I, as I go through my program and I build it out, how do I know and measure in a simple dashboard where I am in my AI journey? Because you talked about making metrics available, and Databricks being the comprehensive system that it is, you can actually plug into system tables within Databricks and be able to quite accurately bring up a dashboard of where in your AI journey you are. And we partnered with Trustable, one of our solution integrators and our partners, to bring up this easy-to-use dashboard. All you have to do is be a subscriber of Trustable, connect to the Databricks system tables, and all of a sudden you now have a dashboard that you can effectively look into and measure where you are in your AI journey, in your compliance journey, in your governance journey, and whatever you want to measure. The next thing I wanted to highlight was, guys, this is just the start. We talked about the AI security framework that came out about 12 months ago. We already issued version 2 of it because things are moving so fast. And we don't anticipate that the governance framework we're publishing in the next couple of weeks is going to be the last of it. So we're going to be continuing to update that. We're going to be issuing V2, V3. We've already started working on version 2 of it. And we have a whole bunch of other deliverables that we intend to make available for our customers, for the marketplace in general, to make each of your AI journeys easier. But we can't do it alone. So we're really looking forward to bringing in more folks from the industry, from the community, to come and collaborate with us to make these artifacts possible, to make these artifacts more relevant to each one of you. And as you were looking through this and listening to this, you might have thought, hey, this is great, but it is not super applicable to me because I have a certain unique set of problems that I have to deal with. Great. If so, come be a part of the community. Tell us what they are, and we'd love to explore those and add more artifacts that help with those. So with that, I think we're out of time, and we want to say thank you very much. I know we're going to be hanging around here for about 20 minutes, so please come talk to us. Thank you again for David's amazing work in helping build out the framework, and thank you all for being here. Have a great time, guys.